Accounting in Business, lecture number 3. Today we're going to discuss about the business organization structures, how, what is the basic concept of the organizational structures, everyday exam tips. This lecture is the continuation of lecture number 2, that business structures that we have discussed in the previous lecture. We have a boundaryless structure of an organization. I've added a reminder of definition of the traditional definition that we have studied in lecture 1 and 2. We repeatedly study, repeatedly revise it so that it gets in our mind. An organization is a social arrangement which pursues collective goals, controls its own performance, and which has a boundary separating it from its environment. Now, this type of a structure is the one where there is no boundary which separates an organization from its environment. But we are running as an organization, our business operations are carried out. We'll study how is it done. It brings together people in one or more physical locations in order to process inputs and create outputs in a traditional one. But here there is a bit flexible system. We use information communication and technology. This type of business is done wholly on the information technology. On it is based on communication. It is based on flexibility. Like in traditional organizations, we have working hours from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. But when we are working as boundaryless structure, the formal structure is broken down. It gets informal. So we have flexible working hours, we have flexible arrangements, and which increase work sharing and home working. It promotes working from home. It promotes um, flexibility. So we have we'll discuss about the three types of boundary-less structures. The first one is virtual organization, the second one is hollow organization, and the third one is modular organizations. This These types of comparisons between how virtual organization differs from hollow, how hollow differs from modular. These differences are frequently asked by the examiner in section A. Either he can ask for a 2 marks question, either he can give you a scenario to identify is an organization a virtual one, is an organization and hollow or a modular one. So there are a bit smaller differences that will identify which organization is it when we study. The first one is virtual organization. Now, the word virtual itself describes that an organization exists without physical existence. It takes it takes the advantage of information technologies. It is based on communication itself. The virtual organization is one which operates primarily through electronic communications, taking advantage of efficiencies made possible by information technology. Now, see how the communications take place. They take place through emails, e-conferencing, intranet, extranet, um, um, communication with the suppliers, links with the suppliers that can be upstream, links with the customers that can be downstream. But what is an organization, virtual organization? Which organizations do we classify as virtual? These can be like ACCA Flip Learning. We don't have any physical existence of the institute. We're not calling you to the institute to come and have services, but we are providing services through information technology, through communication. We are communicating each other with communication. Example can be Amazon that trades with their suppliers, with their customers. They don't have any shop, they don't have any physical existence. Maybe they can have a backup office, they may have warehouses, but they're not operating as an organization. They are dealing virtually, they are working virtually on only on the internet. So virtual organizations are then again those organizations which do not have physical existence, which do not have a boundary that separates it from its environment. We call it virtual organizations. Again, I'll discuss that ECC Flip Learning is an example of virtual organization. They provide you educational services. They're giving you services on the internet through communications, through conferencing, through these video uploads, emails, e-conferencing, and generally intranet and extranet is used. Now, whenever we have something that might have advantages, that might have disadvantages. Whenever we start any business, we start any new setup for anything, the first thing that comes in our mind is the cost benefit analysis. Uh, is our benefit greater than our cost, or our costs are greater than the benefits? Now, the main advantage of virtual organization is costs can be greatly reduced. How? When we are setting an organization, we'll need a premises, building, furniture, fixtures and fittings, electricity, water. Maybe we need a premises on rent. Maybe we have to mortgage it. The cost of transportation of employees, car parking area for employees and employers. These are costs that the business is facing, bearing. These costs are the business that it bears. So when you are running your business as a virtual organization, when your structure is based virtually, your costs can be reduced, your costs can be saved. The second one is that the adoption of e-business solutions can create efficiencies, like for Amazon, and automated reordering and seamless transaction processing occurs, which increases efficiency. You don't have to do it again and again. You don't have to make a person responsible for doing it again and again. So the system-based things are mainly automated, and they provide greater efficiencies rather than doing it on your own. The disadvantages, since there are advantages, there can be disadvantages as well. When it comes to virtual organizations, when it comes to IT, there is a heavy reliance of IT. What if something goes wrong? What if there is a problem in connectivity? There's a virus in the hardware, software, security breaches. You forgot to renew your virus licenses, antivirus licenses, anything. So your work will be greatly affected because you have a heavy reliance on IT. What if my system is not working? I will have to suffer recording these lectures. I will have to suffer uploading these lectures. So what happens is there is a heavy reliance on IT. Second disadvantage is whenever you are bringing a change, there are people who are adaptive. They quickly adapt new things, but there are people who do not adapt things. For example, many people lack IT skills. Many people are unprepared to use information technology equipment. They are not adaptive. And if they're not adaptive, they're still sitting in front of that system. Maybe they will not work properly. They're not motivated. Anything that we can expect from human beings is lack of, but the basic thing is that you lack in IT skills. The third one is there are people who like human interactions. They like face-to-face interactions. So when you're working virtually, maybe you will feel a bit isolated. You will feel that face-to-face interaction is minimal. Maybe you're doing your work properly or not. These are just possibilities. Obviously, every human is different from the other one. So we can just have a possibility that maybe some of the people can feel isolated. The second type of structure of boundaryless organization is the hollow one. Now now we'll discuss about the core activities and non-core activities. There are businesses that have core activities which are very crucial to their business. for example, Nike, a sports goods manufacturer, what does it do? It manufactures its product. It has a name in the market. It has a market share. So they have core activities and they have non-core activities. The most common application of this model is where an organization identifies those competencies that are core and those that are non-core. The ones that are important, the ones who are crucial to the business are retained and the non-core activities are contracted out. Now, this contract is a third party contract. We give that contract to a third party and we say them to perform this work and give it back to us. Like Nike, a sports goods manufacturer, which subcontracts production activities while is maintaining total control over design and quality specification. Now here, what has really happened that it has subcontracted its production activities, but they have a full control over the design, over the quality specifications and everything. In companies, it can be any company, they can have the core activities with themselves. They do it, they perform those tasks themselves, but they outsource their human resource department. They ask that third party to provide us resources in terms of people. They ask that we need 10 ACCAs, we need IT expert, we need some um, operators in the business. Now that control is given to the third party to perform a task and give it back to us. So this is basically this type of an organization is a hollow one where any of the activity is given out to a third party while it's retaining the core one. Modular organization is basically a concept of uh, hollow organization. Now here what really happens is production is outsourced, but each external organization is responsible for only one element of the process. Now what happened in hollow organizations was that production activities were subcontracted, but the control and design, the control and quality was completely in the hands of the organization. But in modular organizations, the external party is responsible for any one of the process that they are handed over, they are given. This happens, this type of organizations exist in those products that involve big tasks. For example, the factory machinery that is made, the car manufacturers, the aircrafts, where different components are made on a large scale. What really happens is car manufacturers often owned by the subsidiaries, which produce components that make up the final product. Now, the engine is responsible for the creation of engine. The design is responsibility of one subsidiary. The design, the painting, the final product finishing, assembling is responsible for other subsidiaries, other companies. But the final product is made and given back to the company. So what really happens is that every subsidiary, every company is responsible for that component, for their design, for their quality, and then they create and give it back to the organization. These are modular organizations. Dreamliner aircraft is a big example, is a very common example where Boeing enters into contracts with many suppliers, each of which is responsible for one component or assembly. Now, this can be a supplier, this can be a subsidiary company where they are responsible for their own work. Either it can be production, it can be assembling, it can be quality control, anything. Now, the main difference, then again, I'll discuss the main difference between hollow organization is that the core business activities are retained with the company itself, with an organization itself, and the non-core is given contracted out. while maintaining total control with the company itself. We just asked out the third party to complete a task and give it back to us. But in modular organization, the external organization is responsible for doing everything, for providing the services, for providing the components, for providing anything that the company has asked for. Shared services is an approach. Shared, shared service organization is a medium through which defined services can be provided across the organization by a dedicated unit. Now, what is this? It is a medium. It is actually a medium through which defined services can be provided across the organization. That example can be, we can have an example of bank where a bank has so many branches in the city, in the region. So what really happens is that a provision of professional training courses and support across large branches is provided at one place. Either it can be on a regional basis or a multinational basis, so that we're not providing each service to each branch. We keep a shared service. We create a medium on which everyone is gathered. If the services are shared to the organization, a dedicated unit is created so that we can create efficiencies. We can save costs, and we can provide a sharing of services. Now, in organizations, for example, a manufacturing business may have an IT unit. Like, for example, the finance department requires IT specialists for their work, for their systems. The human resources will require IT. The marketing department will require IT for their own work. So instead of having every department having a subunit of IT, the organization provides a dedicated unit on the whole so that it can facilitate, it can provide services on a shared basis to every department instead of having every department having their own IT department, having a separate business IT department. A dedicated unit is created so that services are shared. And then again, advantages can be that costs are saved, services are shared. Now we'll discuss about the centralization and decentralization. This relates to decision making. These terms uh, are examinable. Examiner usually asks for a 1 mark question, section A question. He he just asks the difference. He gives a short scenario and asks whether the structure is a centralized one or a decentralized one. Centralized structure, in a centralized structure, the upper level of an organization's hierarchy retains the authority to make decisions. For example, that we discussed in the last lecture, that we have top managers, middle managers, and first line managers. The top managers are the CEOs, CFOs, and COOs. So what really happens in this type of structure is that only the upper level, only the top managers will have the authority to make decisions. Not the middle one, not the frontline managers will have or have the right or have the authority to make decisions. A decentralized a decentralized structure is where authority is delegated to the lower levels, is passed down to the units and people at the lower levels so that they can make decisions. Now, what happens in a centralized structure? The top managers have the have the authority to make decisions. Middle line do not have it. Frontline managers do not have it. But in decentralized, middle managers will have the authority to make decisions according to their levels. The frontline managers will have the authority to make decisions according to their positions. What are the factors that affect the amount of decentralization? Where the first one is management style. What is a management style? Was our organization created with this management style of having a decentralized structure or centralized one? The ability of management, employees. Now, this is an important factor. The more capable the employees are, the organization will be decentralized. Capability depends, like in terms that if you are capable enough to make strong decisions, if you have knowledge, if you have skills, if you have expertise, then you can have the authority of making decisions. So you should be based in a structure where decentralization is promoted. If your organization is geographically spread, for example, one of the branches situated in UK and one of the branches situated in Asia. What really happens is that we will have to give the authority to the managers to make decision making. We will have to base our decentralized structure so that the ones in America, the ones in Asia are making decisions according to the locality, according to the economy, according to any factor that is particular to that area. Size of the organization matters. If the organization is a large one, it is a multinational organization, then you will have to have your structure decentralized. For example, the top management cannot see all the aspects. They cannot deal with everything if the organization is a large one. The scale of activities. Then again, if you're creating hair products, if you're creating fragrances, if you're creating feed products, then you will have to have decentralized structure. Advantages. What are the advantages? When you have the authority to make decisions, you feel a bit motivated. You, you feel empowered. If you are given a responsibility, you're given an authority to make decisions, you feel yourself motivated, you feel that your career path is increasing. Senior management can get free to concentrate on this strategy. Like if the top managers, the CEOs and CFO are free from making decision making, are free from one specific field, then they can have time, they can concentrate on strategy, they can concentrate on business development, they can concentrate on anything other than focusing primarily on specific decision making operations on specific things. And better local decisions are made due to local expertise, like I've discussed. The economy, the factors, day to day business factors in every country are different. So it is better that the manager at that local place can make decisions. It is better that he makes decision rather than those who are away from the country and those who can make mainly not understand what is really going on. So it is better that local people make decisions. Quicker responses is another advantage. Flexibility provides flexibility in quicker responses. For example, if there is any problem in Asia and your board and the top manager is in America, situated in America or UK, it takes time to make decisions. It takes time to make him understand, to send an email, to wait for the response. So just to save time for flexibility, it is better that the person does his decisions. Disadvantages is maybe there can be loss of control by senior management. For example, you're giving control to the middle managers. So the top managers will have loss of control. The training costs are increased. You cannot give someone authority without training, without expertise. If they lack in some kind of expertise, if they're lacking, the, it is it is the duty of the top management to give them training before giving the control. So, and always training costs are expensive. Maybe you will have to give training in-house. Maybe you will have to hire a trainer to give your staff training. So usually trainings are expensive ones. Poor decisions made by inexperienced managers. This can also happen. That basically it is judgment. So um, poor decisions can be made at times by inexperienced managers. Scalar chain and chain of command is an important term. It is an important term that usually examiner asks for a one-mark question. This is a line of This is the line of authority which can be traced up or down the chain of command from the most senior member of the staff to the most junior. We discussed about the management levels of by Robert Anthony. It is, if you remember the pyramid, the strategic, tactical, and operational level. It is scalar chain that comes from the strategic level to the operational level. Basically, chain of superiors from highest to lowest ranks. How to give authority, how how are we giving authority to lower management, and how is it given, how the authority is given to the managers. It is through a chain. For example, the manager, the top manager is giving authority to the middle one, the middle one is giving authority to the frontline managers, to the supervisors. How is this given? This is given through a formal chain, and that chain is called chain of command or a scalar chain. It is basically the communication process, it is the responsibility, it is the authority chain. Now see what I was discussing. That is CEOs, CFOs, and COOs at the strategic level communicate, delegate their authority to the top managers. Now, how are they giving that authority? They are giving through a scalar chain. They are giving through a chain of command that you that the top managers are responsible. They have to report to the top managers, and the middle managers are giving authority to the frontline managers, supervisors. And this all is done through chain of command. This is known as scalar chain. So done for today. You can you can ask me any questions you have. You can WhatsApp me on my number that is added to the group. Thank you.